how can I speed up my Access database that I've deployed out to all my users, and I've done all the steps I needed to do to work on making it faster through network connections and all kinds of stuff. I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie, and today we are going to talk about how to use arrays in your code in order to make your application go faster. Now, today's episode is going to be an introduction. There are countless ways that you can use arrays in your code to make your reports, your forms, your lookups, just about anything that you can think of when you're running into bottlenecks, you can make faster by using arrays. Now, the reason that arrays are so much faster than using all of the tables and queries and indexes and all kinds of things, anything that you might use to make your code faster, the reason why arrays are faster is because they release the program from all of the constraints of disk or network or any of those things, and it allows your code to do, say, lookups, for example. If you keep the lookup list in memory, then it's way faster than if you have to do query against even a local table. And that's the reason why we start to put arrays into our code. Once you become more of a senior developer and you start deploying your applications out to real users who are going to come back and tell you every single time that their drop-down list takes 15 seconds to load up, or even longer, or a report takes 5 minutes to run, you're going to start looking at innovative ways to make your code go faster and your reports and things to load up faster. And so, without further ado, let's get to our introduction to arrays in Access. Okay, so this is a really great episode. This is going to be an introduction to arrays. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up with a few episodes with the critical stuff that you need to know. And we're going to do some things like sorting and stuff like that. And we're going to also do an index on our array to make our lookups even faster when we've got a lot of data in there. And so make sure you stay tuned for those episodes. But getting back to the arrays, the reason why we want to use this kind of stuff is that we all want our application to go faster. And a lot of times you've exhausted all of the traditional ways. You've applied indexes on your tables. You've done things like bring a data set from the server database to your local copy, and you're doing lookups on there, and it's still not fast enough. When you've done all those kind of things, then it's time to start looking at arrays. And so there's disk issues. Local computers can be really slow, and of course there's network issues, which is a really big one. If you've got a really bad network, or it's just a really heavily used network, then in those cases, that's when using arrays to access data one time, and then having that reside directly in your user's RAM on their computer becomes really, really handy, because then your lookups go from being, terribly slow to almost instantaneous. And so those are the reasons that we will use arrays. But today's episode is an introduction so that we can sort of have a foundation to start talking about those more complicated methods. And so what I'm going to do is I did create ribbon and then a new module, and I've saved it, and I've just called the module arrays. So this is a regular Access module. This is not a code behind for a form or anything like that. Make sure that you pay attention to that. And so if you've got a new module, then you can start to look at setting up an array. And we're going to demonstrate very simple arrays to start. And today I'm going to cover 1D and 2D arrays. And we're going to look at how to use those in sort of like the most fundamental way, how to find out how long the array is, how big is it, how to, set the values and change the size of the array if we need to. We're going to cover those things today. And so let's get started here. So I've started a subroutine here, and I'm just going to I'm going to dim my array here. I guess I'll use a naming. I'll call it my array, and I'll put a prefix for ARR on there to say that it's an array. And I'm just going to specify the size of it, and so you can think of an array as like a bunch of little boxes, and each one of those holds a value. And so in this case we say 4 here, which actually means that we have 5 items because there's an item for 0, and so that's how we can get started. So my array has 5 boxes. And so in the first box, which is 0, I'm going to put 1, 2, 3. In the second box, I'm going to put I'll put hello world, and then the third box. So you can see as we load up the elements in the array here, the elements are the items that are inside of each of the boxes. We're sort of loading the array. And you'll notice that I'm putting in different data types here, and that's because I didn't specify a data type when I declared that variable at the top. And so Access will, and VBA in general, will automatically create a variant data type for each of those. So this is an array of variants, as we call it. And so a variant can be anything. It can be a string, or it can be, a number, or it can even be an object or whatever. And so we can load those up. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a debug.print loaded, and you'll see down below there, the window down below, that's the immediate window. So that's sort of like the output from our thing. So I can run my procedure by putting the cursor in the procedure and hitting that run button there. And then you'll see the debug.print put the value down into the immediate window. Now the immediate window is kind of like running your, anything in the program. Actually, you can look up just about anything, but it's as if it's running it from outside of that module. So that's going to be important for later. Now, if I say I wanted to look at all the values in my array, I could create an integer, say, and in this case I'll just say int element. And we'll do a for next loop, and we'll go for int element is 0 to 3. We'll go debug.print, and then the item that's in there. And so in order to do that, we'll just say debug.print, and we'll say my array, and we'll put in element, because as it loops through, that int element will go from 1 to 3. Now we actually have 4 elements or 5 elements in our array. This is going to give us the first 4, and make sure that you pay attention to that. So we've loaded the first 4 elements, and if I run our code now, it loads up the array, and you can see that it goes through those first 4 items, 0 to 3, and it outputs the values of those into the immediate window below. And so that's exactly what we wanted to see. Now I can go ahead and I can change that 3 to a 4, and I can output everything. So if I run it now, it'll actually go through all 5 elements. And so if I run that, you'll see that it spits it out, and there's a blank for the last one because it's actually empty. So we printed that out, and it's actually empty. Now I put that in there because on some older systems, when you declare it, it actually does declare n-1 elements. But in the sort of more modern versions of Access, that is been corrected, I guess you'd say. So now when you declare a 4-element array, you actually get you'll get 5 elements. You'll get 0 to 4. So just be aware of that, and when you're creating your arrays, and we can move on here. So now what I can do is I can go into the immediate window and execute code as if I was going to look at it from the rest of the program. So if I try to call that array, you can see it doesn't know what that is. Even though I created it inside of my subroutine, the problem is that array only exists for as long as that subroutine is running. But if I take out the array and I move it up to the header area there, it's going to create a variable that's going to persist in memory. And so that's a really great thing, because it means that you can create an array and you can load it, say when your program starts, or like when a form loads and you just need to have really fast lookups for something, then you can do that. So now, as you can see, I was able to run my subroutine to load the array, but when I go and try to look up the value using 1 there, I wasn't able to look at that because the immediate window it's as if that code is running, but you're outside of the module, and so you need to put a public on your array up there, so that it can be accessed by different parts of the system. And so now if I run my procedure, I can see that it got loaded, and if I wanted to look up a value, I can ask for it by putting the question mark in front of there, and it does go and it looks at that array that's in that module that's been loaded at the start of the program, or when the form loaded, or whatever. So now I can go and get other values. And so this is a very simple example, but having those values available in memory is really great, because if you've got like a massive parts list for manufacturing or whatever, you can easily carry the lookup list in memory, and you can access it at the drop of a hat. It's very, very, very fast. And so I could go and set finally set the fifth value of the array. So I could say, this is really great. I like arrays or whatever. And so now we've got a fully loaded 5-element array that's in memory that can be accessed from all over the system. So if I hit run again, now it's loaded all of those items, and now you can see that I've actually reloaded the same array, because the array actually, once it's been created, it exists. And so the cool thing is that you can change the values too. It is mutable, as they say. So you can change the values in each of the boxes of your array. So imagine you've got a whole bunch of boxes, you can do that. So how can I find the length of my array? Well, you can use the ubound function for that, because sometimes you're going to get back arrays and you don't know how big they are. And so you need to be able to look at, how big is it? How big is this array? And because if you're going to actually look at anything in the array, you need to know how big it is, so you can either loop through or do whatever to get values out of it. And so now what I can do is, as I mentioned, I can change the values, so it's mutable, which makes it very, very handy for, if you want to keep that list and then change the values. So I changed the date in the fourth item, to February 22nd, 2022. And then if I look up that same item, now remember, running commands in the immediate window is like, it's the same as if you were running them somewhere else in the application and not from this module. So it's really cool. So that means I was able to say, look it up from a form or a report or whatever, and I can do that. So how can I change the size of the array? Say I wanted to change the size of it. And you can do that by using redim. So that's changing, it's like redim, you're redeclaring it as a new size. And you can use preserve to make sure that when you recreate the array again, you preserve any values that are there. And so you can use redim preserve. And in this case, we'll specify 5, which is 6 elements. It's 0 to 5. And we'll load that with, just as we did before, we'll say myArray5 is equal to, this is an added item. And you can see I've got an error there. And the reason for that is that we did already dimension our array, which is the 4 in the in our statement up above for public. So we're going to take that 4 off, and that's going to change the declare of the public variable to just a variant data type. And what we'll do is we'll redim our public variable inside of our procedure. So first we'll do a redim to say 4. We can do that to change it, and that'll set the first 4, and then say down the road you wanted the 5th item, you can redim preserve array 5, and that'll create one with 6 items. And so you can see it got loaded there, and so now we have an array that was originally loaded with 5 elements, I should say, and then now we've said 5, which is actually 6 elements. And so now we can call that 6th item, and we can get the value from that one. So we can change the size of the array, which is a really great thing. It's a really nice feature, and use that preserve sort of keyword there that's going to keep the values that you had in there before. It's going to keep those when you resize the array, and that's very, very handy. Okay, so that kind of covers our 1D array, our list, as you might say. But what if I need a bit more meat to my array? I need a key and a value or something like that, something with more columns. Well, you can do that by changing your array from a single dimension to 2 dimensions, which makes it a table. And you can do that by specifying the size in your redim statement. And I've set it to 5 and 2 there, which means 6 columns and 3 rows. And I could go and remove the extra stuff at the bottom there, and I'm just gonna you can see it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the 6 items, that 6 columns I would call them. And then we have 2 for rows, which actually means 3 rows. So I can copy everything that I had up above there if I want to load another row, say, and I can I'll put a comment in between here. I'll just say second row. So we're going to load that, and we could change this one to say first row, and now we can see what we're loading into each row. And in order to load the items in there, we need to specify the row that we're adding them to. So the first item number there is for the columns. So there are 6 columns, and I'm going to I changed that 2 to 1 up there because I'm just going to do 2 rows. And so now what I can do is I can say, load this first row with all of these items, and then I'm going to say load the second row, which is 1, with all of these other items, and so that will load a 6 column 2 row array for you that you can use for lookups and all kinds of stuff. And so if I run that one, oh, it looks like I broke it. Let's see. Oh, I missed one on the bottom there. Okay, so there we go. We need to put our comma 1 so that it knows where to put that that last value. And so if I run that, you can see now it's loaded all of this stuff into the array, and now there's a 2D array in our in memory, which is great. And I think I should probably go and change the values on the second row so they're actually different from the first row if we want to look those up. Otherwise that might be confusing. So we'll put a 4, 5, 6 in there for the first one. Say that's an ID number or something. The second column on the second row, we'll put wow, this is great, and we can change the decimal we had in the third column, and we can change the date here to something, say 2021. There we go, and then we can change the value in say this comment column here. So as you can see, as I'm putting these in, you can see now with the two-dimensional array, we've actually got something that's a little bit more useful than just a simple list, and that is super handy. So I'll run that again. You can see now it's loaded, and it's got a nice little table there. And you can also call the procedure just by calling the name of it when it's a sub. And you can see I just typed it in there. So that's really showing that this is like running it from another place in the program. So that's very important to notice, because this means you can call this list from anywhere, from your reports, your functions, your forms, all that kind of stuff. So now if I want to call a value from there, I can say, what's the the first row and the first column, and it's hello world. But if I do the same thing and I do the second row, which is 1, then you can see that it's got the value in there, just like a table. So now you can do things like iterate through a big table, and you can do calculations or do lookups or any of that kind of stuff, which is really awesome. So you might be wondering, how do I find the size of this 2D array, because we did the size of the other one, and you do it by specifying, you'll use ubound again, so you'll throw in that the array into your ubound function, and you'll put first dimension for the columns and second dimension for rows. And so now you can iterate through a whole array. You can have a big list in memory that is like super fast to look stuff up and doesn't rely on any disk or network or anything, and it's very, very handy. And you could also get those values, say you wanted to add, just have them in your procedure because you want to go through this list and get values, if it was a giant list, say, and you could actually just go, my row count is this, and then load up your column count as well. You could say rows my array, and then comma 2, and then you could say my columns are ubound my array 1. And then you could change use those values for other purposes, whether it's going from 0 to long the rows, or 0 to columns. You can definitely loop through those and do all kinds of stuff. In this case, I'll just debug.print. I'll say loaded this many columns and this many rows, and now when I hit my when I run that, or if I just call it by typing it into the immediate window, you can see now it's going to change the behavior a little bit there. So I can do that, and you can see it loaded 5 columns and 1 rows, and that is an introduction to arrays in VBA. Need help or coaching on your project? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. Hope you enjoyed today's discussion on having an introduction to arrays in Microsoft Access. If you like what you saw today, please give the video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell when you see the bell, and if you have any questions or comments, put those in the comment section below. Have a great day, have a safe day, and I'll catch you next time.